Good morning, everybody. How's the volume on this? Is this going to work for everybody? They're making a video for you if later on you want a copy of this. Clark says that you can get a copy. All you have to do is contact folks and they will be able to make it available to you. Okay? So what we're talking about this morning, we're talking about visits, but we're also talking about challenging behaviors. And my point in talking about both these things is my goal when somebody in your life develops some form of dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, you need to learn how to do more than just survive this disease. And the reason you want to do more than just survive this disease as a person in this individual's life is it's a long process. It is very, very long. In most cases, on average, it's 8 to 12 years that the person is going to go from first symptoms to end of life. And that's a long time to be in survival mode. I will also tell you, human beings are not meant to just survive, because if you just go into survival all the time, you are not the kind of person that somebody with dementia wants to be around, because you turn into your mother on a bad day. You turn into your father when he was really upset, because when we go into survival mode, our brains change. And when our brains change that way, it is a very unhealthy change, not only for the person we're caring for, but for us. And the bad news about us, those of us who are caregivers for people with dementia, raise your hand if you are. You either direct, or it's a family member, or it's a friend. And down in this area, I'm finding there's a lot of folks who are friends, who are having to deal with the issues of a friend they really care about, who's showing signs of the disease. And when that's the case, you're having to learn how to cope with somebody who used to be one way and is now being somewhere else, in some way else. And sometimes they're just like they used to be, and sometimes they're not. And so what it requires of you is a flexibility that there may be days you don't feel like being. But I'm going to tell you something, on those days, stay home. On those days, make a decision to keep yourself away from that person. And what I'm also going to tell you is on those days, you better have somebody else to call on to step forward to be a friend to that individual when you can't do it. Because when we are caregivers of people with dementia, we actually increase our own risk of developing dementia. Why do you think that might be? Why? Just why do you think that it might be that when you caregive for somebody with dementia, that it turns out that your risk factors are higher? Why? I don't understand it myself. You're only doing it 24/7 for years.
What am I supposed to say?
Well, that's beyond me, you know. My point in bringing this up is very often when we're caregivers, one of the reasons it's suspected that our risk goes up is, guess what we live with a lot? Stress. And stress is a risk factor for developing dementia. And it's turning out it's a pretty significant risk factor. People who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, actually increase their risk of dementia by about 50% compared to their peers. And so when you're a caregiver and you can't figure out how to manage how you're feeling in a positive way and learn coping strategies that are positive, guess what happens to all those feelings?
Anger.
Oh, shut up. I mean, so, now those of you who have not seen me present, I role play and mess with your minds a lot. And so he knew that, and he sat up here, so oh well, you know, he knew what he was getting into. If at any point you don't want to role play back with me when I'm trying to get you to sort of try something out, do this. Go ahead and practice. Do this right now. What is this in sports? Now, here's the nice thing about me. I don't actually have dementia as of right now, to the best of our knowledge. So if you do this, I will quit doing what I'm doing, because I'll be respectful of the cue that you just gave me that you don't want to do this. What's the problem when people have dementia? You can give that cue all day long, and it's not going to do you a bit of good, except, what are you doing with the big T? You can quit that T and get out of my way. What happens is we need to learn to cope better because they can't. Okay? So we're going to come back to that, but my goal really for you is that we need to really start talking about this more intensely. One of the things I find that is once you understand this disease in a greater depth and you have a greater appreciation for where they're coming from, it frequently will allow you to behave differently. And the reason is once you understand why they're doing what they're doing, it changes how you look at what they're doing. And it gives you that little bit of perspective that you need sometimes to take that step back and realize they don't realize they've asked me the same question 22 times in the car on the way to the doctor's office. I know that. So instead of saying, what time did I tell you the appointment was, Mom? What time? Instead, I will choose a different behavior, and the behavior I will choose is, it's at 12:30. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, there's this song that I wanted to ask you if you remember. Now, I want to point out that I'm fooling around, but not really. Because when she's asked me that same question for 22 times, what happens to your body? Your tension builds up. And what you're going to find is you start holding your jaw really tight. And you start holding your body really still. Because you're really afraid you're going to what? Lose it. And so you're driving like this. Now go ahead and get that facial thing going on. Hold yourself really tight. Go ahead, try it. Get your arms out there. Hold on to the steering wheel. And you understand you're gripping the steering wheel really tight. And you're grinning like this because you don't really want to say what's right behind your teeth. Okay? So you're like this. Now, here's the piece that you don't realize. You're getting all this stuff. Go ahead and tighten up a little bit. What you don't realize is you're now holding your breath. And although you're breathing in a little bit, you're never breathing out. And because you keep breathing in but not breathing out, what you're starting to do is deoxygenate your brain. You're not getting oxygen to your brain. And when your brain doesn't get oxygen, one of the very first places that gets distressed is your emotional control center. And your frontal part, which is where you make good choices and decisions. Which is why very shortly you're going to say, what time did I tell you? If you don't learn a new strategy. So when you're visiting with someone who has dementia, when you're struggling with someone who has dementia, when their behavior is really getting on your nerves, I want you to realize the very first thing I did is try to take care of myself so I can take care of them. And I realized that I'm not breathing. And that's one of the first things to recognize. You're not breathing. You're breathing in, but you're not breathing out. You're holding on to it. So what you're going to do, now try that. I want you to breathe in through your nose like that and suck it in. And make a little pursed lips and you better do it again. I don't think you're ready to talk yet. Roll your shoulders a little bit on that one. Okay, and now let's try one more time. Breathe in one more time. And blow out. Now what I want you to realize is what you took are what are called 3 deep cleansing breaths. And they did a little research study and they looked at caregivers for people with dementia and they compared to not caregivers. And what they found is our stress level is higher than the average bear. And what they did is they found that our cortisol level, negative stress hormone that causes your blood pressure to go up, your blood sugar to be less well controlled, your heart rate to race, your cholesterol levels to jump up, which is, all this is really good if you're being chased by a tiger. Not really good when you're living with somebody for 30 years or 20 years or 10 years or 12 years. It's actually very dangerous for your system to keep those things like that. What happens is when your cortisol level is high, your body starts having some issues. And anybody who's a caregiver, how many of you have hypertension, blood pressure problems that you didn't used to have? How many of you have gained weight? How many of you have been recognizing your blood sugars are harder to control? And what's happening is that you're stressed a lot of the time. And so when we're going to do a visit, if when you're thinking about spending time with the person you care about, or you're thinking about trying to help, you're already feeling yourself go, okay, well, this is going to be a disaster. Every time I ask her to go to the bathroom, she starts with, I just went. And I know she didn't just go. I know it's going to be a problem. I know she's probably wet. And I try to help her change, and we have a fight. Okay? So if that's the case, and you already know that going in, who needs to do something different? And the first thing to do different is to get yourself ready for this. Because if you're going to come and visit, if you're going to spend time, you need to think about you before you think about the person with dementia, because it's a two-way street. And people with dementia are just like everybody else.